service or mission and all. And so what I'll do, if you don't bring it up, I'll wait to the end. And other than just a very brief introduction, what I'm going to do at the end is ask for you to say contact information. Would you like for anything for donation? I think Carol told you some years ago. I don't think she worked specific with you, but she worked with your organization in tutoring kids after school, and she still remembers that. And I definitely want you to please bring up your background and how this got started, and just tell us about it. I love to come from the viewpoint of how God is working in you and what He's done for you.
Okay, we're really in transition as a mission right now. Things have happened a couple of weeks ago in Vietnam that really we were not expecting. In one way, we knew that things might be getting worse as far as persecution or working there because of China. China's been tearing down crosses now. Many churches, because they don't even want the visual symbol of Christianity in China. That's been happening now for a couple of years, and there's been some real fights about that. I mean, pastors have gone out and stood in front of crosses and all that.
Rex, do you mind us showing what you've just been saying there?
No.
Have you been taping this? Hi there, this is a little bit different. This is Glenn. We normally start with that brief introduction and just let our guests go. I'm very excited today to listen and introduce a gentleman I met some years ago. I was very impressed by his witness, his testimony about the mission that God has laid out for him and what's going on. This is Rex Almquist, and Rex, without further ado, I'd rather you just take over and whatever God's put on your heart, just share it.
Well, our mission, Southeast Asian Relief, we've been in Vietnam under the communist system now for 24 years. And it's not been easy. We lost our license. Once we got it back, but we are a licensed NGO, non-government organization in Vietnam. And our primary function there, and always has been, is to work with youth and children that are really poor, that have one parent or no parent, that have been abandoned or living with relatives, maybe have dropped out of school, are just in a dangerous living situation because of poverty. That may also mean illness, disease. It can mean just simply having to drop out of school because of not having the funds to keep going. Just numerous things. It could mean maybe getting up to the 4th or 5th, maybe 10th grade, and then having to drop out and then not having any skill, not being employable. So it may mean vocational training. We're involved in Vietnam with school scholarships, vocational training, helping critically ill kids get well. We have a vocational training center in Da Nang City, which is in the northern central part of Vietnam. People that are familiar with Vietnam know that China is above it, and then way up north is Hanoi, which is the government head. And then in the center of the country, along the coast, South China Sea, is Da Nang City, and that's where we operate, right in the center there. And in the big farming province around that city, and Da Nang has over 1 million people in it. And of course, way down south is used to be Saigon, but now it's called Ho Chi Minh City. But we basically work just in the Da Nang area and Quang Nam, farming country in the mountains, etc. We work with, again, really poor kids. We work with tribal kids, mountain kids, Vietnamese mountain kids, as well as city kids. But I was telling you, Glenn, that we Vietnam has never been easy to work in, but we as a mission, we've always decided to work above ground, to be a witness to the communist government officials that we have to work with, as well as the general people and the poor kids that we have daily contact with. But Vietnam, there is not what is called political correctness there. And so when I go into Vietnam, we have 4 staff. We have 4 Christian national staff working full-time for Southeast Asian Relief. And from the very beginning, we put the major responsibility on the Christian nationals. In fact, we told them we're not going to be like other agencies to having a Western person in Da Nang sitting in an office and controlling things. We we want to help you be able to understand the work that the Lord's called us to do, and then you do it yourself. You take the major responsibility. We'll stand behind you, give you guidance and direction if necessary, but we'll basically be your partner and help you. And of course, Vietnam is poor and Christians are poor. And so we have been primarily been involved in fundraising, gathering funds and then sending funds into Vietnam. And then I go into Vietnam. I used to go in twice a year. I used to be there during the summer and fall, and I would go later in the year. But because the airplane ticket fare jumping so high now, it's $2,000 to go back and forth with a working visa. $2,000 can help a lot of kids. So now I usually go into Vietnam about right now and stay June, July, August, and September.
You'll be leaving shortly, I believe, for that trip.
Yeah, but things have happened recently which has changed that. But we have been concerned because we know that we cannot do missionary work because that's illegal. It's not allowed. I cannot bring kids to church. I cannot even have kids walk with me to church because that's missionary activity. And I've been brought into the police department several times because they've seen me walking to church with groups of kids. And they say, who are you and where are you from? And you can't do that because that's missionary activity. You're a foreigner. Vietnam is not like America where you walk out the street and you see kids and families from all over the world and you don't know whether they're American citizens or whatever. Over there it's totally different. It's all Vietnamese people. And so any foreigner like myself, we stick out, very readily because there's not that many of us. And so when we go into Vietnam, I'm supervised all the time. You have to have a government partner, which for us is the Department of Labor, Veteran Affairs, and Social Services. The police have my daily working schedule. I can't walk across the street. If this was Vietnam, I cannot walk across the street and talk to someone and just be friendly. That's not allowed. If the person has a home that has a roof that needs repaired, or has a critically ill child, or has a child or a young person needing vocational training, or a younger person needing school scholarships or something like that, then with government approval, I can go and talk. But usually I always have government official, at least one government official with me, listening to my conversations, because the other thing too is there's very few Western people that can speak the language. And I began speaking years ago when I was in the military. I had to. And if you're going to be close to kids and want to really understand them, you have to speak the language.
I would really appreciate if you'd take just a moment, because even though it's been some number of years, I remember your testimony, your witness, and I'd like for you to share how your ministry got started.
Well, I was like many other young people during the Vietnam era. I felt the calling of the Lord at that time to be in missions, and I felt that He was leading me into missionary aviation. So I had spent about 4 years in flight school and working in an airport trying to finance all that stuff, and then I had 3 years of mechanic training, but I was never able to get my A&P, my airframe and power plant rating, because I was drafted. When I was drafted, I always had a love for poor kids and youth, because I had been involved with Youth for Christ when I was in high school and college. But like everyone else, I didn't want to go to Vietnam. I didn't really know much about it. I knew it was on the other side of the earth. But I was drafted, and I was told, well, you've had quite a bit of education at that point, so you won't be put in the infantry. Well, I was drafted right after the Tet Offensive in 1968. If you remember, in 1968, there was an agreement between North and South Vietnam where there would be a stand down and there would be peace, and the families would be able to celebrate the Lunar New Year, be back in their homes and families. Well, the South Vietnam did that. They stood down, they went back to their families to celebrate the New Year, but the Communist North did not. They stockpiled war material in jungles, and everything just broke loose. And of course, the South Vietnamese had honored the agreement, where the North did not. And so at that point, South Vietnam almost lost the war. If it wasn't for U.S. presence there, because we were not on stand down, we would have been lost. And so right after that happened, then everybody was drafted. And so I was drafted, and I was put exactly where I thought I would be, in the infantry. So all I ever learned to do in the military was learn how to fire all their weapons and live in the jungle and kill people. I had a part of a certain small part of that at the very end where I was trained in infantry intelligence. And so I went into Vietnam with a sergeant rank, again, not really wanting to go, but I didn't know what the Lord was doing at the time, but with the infantry intelligence, MOS, military occupational specialty, I lived with the South Vietnamese military. I never lived with the U.S. forces. And I lived in the mountains, and so I had a lot of contact with tribal kids and street kids and then mountain Vietnamese kids. And we were told I was with the U.S. Army as with the 199th Light Infantry Brigade. We were told never trust the kids because they could be booby-trapped or they could, learn where you are and tell the NVA, the North Vietnamese Army, or the local communist supporters, the Viet Cong, where you are and all that stuff. So, but when I stepped off the airplane, I knew immediately I was in a very, very poor country. And I saw thousands of kids. The fathers were, of course, all in the military. And there were real poor kids. We were kind of confined when I first went over there, of course, to a military base. But because of my rank, I was a sergeant, I was given a lot more freedom, and so I was able to leave the compound and walk around and see some things. And so I saw all of these kids, and they'd come up to me and they would talk to me and all that. Of course, they didn't understand a thing they were saying, but they were surprised because I was out with the people. The military was always kept pretty much behind the military compounds. But that's how I began to sense that I was in a real poor country with a lot of kids, and it was quite dangerous, and I could not speak. I was pickpocketed soon because I realized these kids are really sharp, and they're smart, and they see Americans with nice military uniforms and being all clean and all that. And so I always treated the kids well, but I didn't really know how to handle them because I was told never to have too much to do with them. So, but I didn't do anything to harm them in any way, and I kind of tried to stay away from them. Well, you can't stay away from them because they'll come to you, and they came to me several times, and they would take my hands, and then a couple of guys would come behind me and then wrestle through my back pockets, and so I lost some things that way. And so I thought, well, this is just not going to work. I've got to be able to communicate with these kids. But I had a love for them because I was a Christian at the time. But I'd never been around severe poverty, and I've been around kids that really, if they didn't steal, they might not have enough food for that day. Mm-hmm. So I got a dictionary and I began learning Vietnamese, grabbing anybody that I could find. And a lot of times it was the kids, and I would point to a word and they would say it, and it would be Vietnamese, English, English, Vietnamese. So I would point to this word and try to communicate with them. But it was tonal. I didn't understand the tones, but I was able to gather a vocabulary over time. And because of that, it was the tribal kids, mountain kids, and street kids that saved my life. Because I had orders. I was at a small unit. I had a truck driver, and I had a translator, and I had 12 young North Vietnamese Army NVA guys that had been captured. And they were given the choice of going to prison or helping the free government in the South, the Republic of Vietnam. And of course, they didn't want to go to prison, so they said, okay, well. But that was our unit, and we had orders. We were supposed to go to different hamlets and areas to get information. These young North NVA guys were supposed to give us intelligence information through our translator about if there were any NVA or Viet Cong in the area and what the plans were and all that stuff. Then we would try to get this information to the U.S. Army, the 199th Light Infantry Brigade. But just to make a long story short, I saw combat, and I walked into very dangerous positions. Sometimes I remember that where the Lord really woke me up one time was I was new there, and I got orders to visit this certain hamlet. So we were walking down this trail, and a group of these mountain kids, they had known me. They evidently they trusted me because I always treated them well, But they came up right in front of me and put their hands on my chest, and they shook their hands, and they were talking Vietnamese. I know now what they were saying, but I didn't know then. But I knew for sure they did not want me to keep going, and I thought to myself, well, I've got to go. I've got orders, and so I just nicely kind of pushed them aside and said, I've got to go. I've got to go. So I walked on down the trail and went right into an ambush, and by sniper fire. And boy, I'll tell you, bullets were just flying all over, just missing me by an inch or so. And so I dropped to the ground right away, as well as the other guys, and we crawled out of there and got out of the way. But that woke me up, because I knew that those boys were they knew where these NVA guys, or where the Viet Cong were, and they knew where the ambush was. They knew all of that, and they knew I was walking into it. But because I did not listen to them, I just obeyed my orders. I could have been killed right then. So from that point on, I really started working a lot more, learning Vietnamese. I was able to communicate with the kids, and I began to help them. They needed a way to survive. So what we did was I needed a way to have clean uniforms. So they would wash my uniforms, and I would get a little amount of money and give them money to buy soap and stuff. And they'd hang my uniforms on barbed wire and all that stuff. But at least I had the uniforms that were clean, and I could give them a little bit of money. Over time, I had a lot of holes in my uniform because of the barbed wire, but at least I was clean. And it was a relationship where they were not stealing; they were working to help me. But they were my protection. And if it wasn't for them, I walked into some real difficult places 3 or 4 times. One time I was really pinned down, and these mountain kids would crawl to me, and they would say, I mentioned to follow them, so I followed them. They led me all the way out, crawling all over the place, and got me out of the area, and where I could finally get back to safety, or else I'd been, probably captured. Or definitely, that happened 3 or 4 times. And so when I survived the military, I didn't really like being in combat. I was supposed to be in combat, but I definitely saw that, and sometimes our unit was taken out of the area to ride shotgun on convoys to protect the convoys, and so we saw combat in that way too, and that bothered me, because usually we would always go by a place by the convoy where an ambush had been set up. And the NVA, the Viet Cong, had firepower going across the road, and you can't just sit, because it's more dangerous, because then you sit there and fire at you. So you got to keep going. You put the gas pedal to the metal and ram right through, but you have to go through that fire area, and that happened several times. And then when we got to the next little village or hamlet, these guys that were the truck drivers for the convoys, they'd be all angry. These are American guys. They'd be all angry, and they'd pick up rocks and throw at kids and throw at the people at the next hamlet and all that, swearing and cussing. But I outranked them, so a lot of times I would get out of the truck and I would tell them, "No, you can't do this. You cannot do this, because you're going to lose the war. We have to. It's not these people's fault that we were in an ambush, maybe 3 or 4 kilometers down the road. These people might be completely innocent. We don't know that. So, but throwing rocks at them and swearing at them, that's going to they're going to get to the NVA, the Viet Cong, because they're going to be anti-American, and they're going to tell us where we are and all that stuff. It's going to make things worse. So just don't do it." I had to do that several times. I remember one time I had a truck driver who didn't listen to me, and he was spitting at kids, and I got really angry. And when you get angry, of course, you have a lot of adrenaline. And I was small, but I was so angry, I grabbed him and pulled him out of the truck through the truck window. And he was much bigger than I was, and I slammed him up against the truck. And I said, "That's exactly how we're going to lose the war." And I locked and loaded on him, which meant I put a round in the chamber at an M16, which I had to carry with me all the time, and pointed at him and said, "You do that one more time, and you're going to be in serious trouble. I'm going to report to you, and if I have to, shoot your hand or something like that, I'll do it. But none of this stuff's going to take place." And so that happened numerous times. But through it all, when I came back out of the military, and when I got the GI Bill, so I went to college, but I completely changed. I still loved aviation. I still loved to fly and all that, but I switched from aviation into juvenile corrections, social work and juvenile corrections, and I got a master's degree in juvenile corrections and medical social work, and went back to Vietnam. I could not. We had not. The U.S. forces had not pulled out completely. It was not 1972 yet. It was about 19. Let's see, must have been close to that. It must have been about 1971 when I went overseas. There was a children's hospital that needed a social worker to communicate with kids because kids were dying, and they shouldn't have been dying because they were not dying because of the diseases or the combat injuries. They were dying because of depression. They didn't know where their parents were or whatever. So that's when I went over there and I worked for about a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And then it got too dangerous and I had to leave. I came back and I worked for a while in the United States, but then the huge refugee camps then began in Southeast Asia where people were escaping out of Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. Both people were landing on different island countries, and the Lao and Cambodian families, their children were trying to escape and walk out of Cambodia and Laos. So at these huge camps in Thailand, Malaysia, Hong Kong, Philippines, Indonesia. And so I decided to work in the camps.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked in the camps with a company, minors, kids that had walked in the camps without parents from about 19, I'm trying to think, Vietnam fell in 75, about 1978 to about 1990. And then went into Vietnam and finally got into Vietnam and began working in 93. Our mission was one of the first organizations that had legal permission to work in Vietnam before things were normalized. We got permission from the State Department to work with kids. And so I went over there, and it was hard starting because the North Vietnam had taken over everything, and there were Russians all over the place, and the Russians thought I was Russian. They'd come up and start speaking to me in Russian. I said, no, I don't understand. They didn't know where I came from. I was able to get into Vietnam because I could leave a refugee camp and go over there and visit. And so I visited. The first time I got in there was let's see, maybe 78.
Mm-hmm.
But didn't get in there, and we started in 93, so I got in there about 89. No, you could not get into Vietnam in the 70s. I got in there in the 80s, the end of the 80s, as a tourist, just to see what it was like, and people were sleeping on sidewalks, and it was just really bad, really bad. And then finally got in there in the early 90s, and then finally got State Department permission, but we had to get Vietnam government permission. And so that took another couple of years, right? Go in there and talk to government officials and say, we organized as Southeast. We were known before as Aid to Refugees Incorporated, so we had to change our name because that wouldn't go over very good with the Communist Socialist Republic of Vietnam. So we changed our name to Southeast Asian Relief, and it took a couple visits, and then finally an older man in Da Nang City, Department of Foreign Affairs. I don't remember his name, but he finally said, "Well, let's let this American see what he can do because we need help. We're very poor, and he has a heart for kids." And I was honest. I told him I was formerly in the military. They said, "Why do you care about our kids?" And I told them. Mm-hmm. So it's one thing they understood, and they didn't trust me, but this older man allowed me to begin work. And so that's how we started, and we were the only agency at that time to pick our own staff, so we found some Christians and had them work for us. And that's true today. We're about the only organization today that has not government-appointed staff working for us, which are connected with the Communist Party. We have Christian nationals that we have chosen ourselves. But that was because we were there, years and years ago.
Rex, I'd like for you to give some contact information. If somebody feels led to make a donation, we encourage that. But how can people get in touch with you?
We have a website that's searusa.org, SCAR-USA.org, where you get information. But we do not have on that site a place where you can give by computer. Our most of people that give donations to us, send it by mail.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sent to this address, just SAER Incorporated, or INC, P.O. Box 15025. That's 15025.
Mm-hmm.
St. Petersburg, Florida 33733.
Okay.
And our mission is going through transition now, because we have been working with kids like now for 24 years, and I can't do it because that's missionary activity. I jump on a motorcycle and go to church on Sundays by myself, and then meet with the kids inside the church. But our Christian National staff we've got a van, and they've always been able to bring kids to church that wanted to go. The police and the Communist Party are always afraid that we're forcing kids to go to church, or we're buying their faith as Christians. Like, will we repair a home, or we'll help a kid get well, or provide vocational training, or school scholarships, or whatever. But in doing that, they think that we're doing that to kind of force them to become Christians or whatever. But we've told this, no, we don't do that. We care for the kids of Vietnam because the Lord who made them loves them. And the Lord in heaven who made me and you, the Bible says, loves you as much as he loves me. And if we have, those of us that are Christian and follow the Lord Jesus, if we have a means to help someone, the Bible says this very clearly, if we have the means to help someone, we don't do it, it's sin. And so we do care for the kids and care for you. But again, they don't understand it. They don't understand Christian compassion and love. They always look for something under the table. Why are you doing this? And so the only thing that makes sense in their mind is you're helping kids to capture them and make them Christians. So that's always a battle. And the church in Vietnam, because our organization, we're there as a relief organization, but we are also there to introduce boys and girls that want to and have a heart to find the Lord Jesus to the church. And the communist government doesn't allow the church to get involved in social activity or social work or anything like that. It's just strictly religious activity. And our mission has been one of the few missions that have been really a bridge all of the years between the church and the real poor. And the poor kids that we help, a lot of times they never even thought about going to church because they've been taught that it's the imperialistic American church. And Americans started, which is true. The Catholic Church was started by Jesuit priests out of France, so it's looked at a little bit different than the Protestant Church, because the Protestant Church was started by American missionaries, and they were Christian Missionary Alliance, a lot of them, or a few Southern Baptists or Christian Reformed, but the church was started by Americans. So it's different. But the thing that's different now with the communist government is we've always been able to bring kids to church, because Sunday's not even a work day. But now the police have recently come to our staff and said, no, you cannot take kids to church anymore because you're working with a foreign organization, an American organization. So now they're saying if you bring kids to church, you're breaking Vietnam law. And they're using the term missionary work, but that doesn't really fit because our Christian staff are Christian nationals. They're not, and I'm proud of them. They've come forward and said, well, that they are Christians and they want to bring kids to church. No one forces them to believe, but if they want to go to church, we have the van and we've always brought them to church, because the Vietnam law says you have the freedom to believe or not to believe. That's in their constitution. So this is a new development, and so our staff said, well, we are Christians, so we will. What do we do? What can we do to keep being able to take kids to church that want to go, that don't have transportation? And the police told them to retire. So that's a brand new development, and we're facing that. And normally I'm getting ready to go to Vietnam, but because of that situation, we had a long board meeting recently, and I decided to hold back a little bit and not go in right now. The other thing that's keeping me here is because we do a lot of work locally with Southeast Asian kids. We're in the school system. We are a consultant agency to Pinellas County Schools. So we work with a lot of new Asian kids that are brand new in our school system that don't know English and don't know how to live here. And we help them. We're usually in about 3 or 4 different schools. But in doing that, we ran onto a family several years ago, mother from the mountains of Vietnam, a Catholic family. And it was a mother and 3 boys. And they were super poor. Mother had a younger brother here. But we began helping the 2 boys in school. The mother's oldest son was in his 20s, so he was out of school. He had 2 years of college in Vietnam. But the 2 younger boys, one younger boy, the youngest one, had just started middle school, and the other one started high school. And they knew 0 English. So the school system, Dallas County Schools, contacted us, so we began working with them. And then through working with the boys, I met the mother. So we've been involved with that. Well, the boys had terrible teeth. Because in Vietnam, way up in the mountains, dental care and medical care is really hard to find. That's good. And their teeth were really bad. So we began working and searching out an organization. We began working with St. Petersburg Dental Center on 73rd Avenue and 4th Street here in St. Pete. And they introduced us to an organization called Smiles Change Lives. Mm-hmm. So we got both boys involved with that, and we working with Smiles Change Lives now, after 2 years, have now come to the end of the bracing. So they've got straight teeth. They look so much better. But the older boy in high school who graduated just a couple weeks ago, his front bite is not coming together, and so the lower jaw extends more than the upper jaw. So we're in the process of having a dental surgeon, and we're waiting for insurance to agree with it, because it's not cosmetic. He's had to rip the meat, and instead of chewing it, he uses his very back teeth to chew. He's thin. He's never ate right. So we're trying to get the insurance policy to approve the surgery, which is absolutely necessary. Mm-hmm. But it hasn't been approved yet. But it was supposed to have been done in May. It hasn't been done. So I'm staying back because hopefully I'm just praying that it will take place really soon. And I can't leave for Vietnam until my boy, I know he's okay, and then I'll leave. Mm-hmm. So a combination of things.
Rex, this is about the time I normally thank somebody for coming in, which of course I do, and asked for people for prayers and financial help if they can do it, and if this has touched your heart. But today I feel led to just spend a moment with you in prayer. And if you allow me, let me pray for you in your ministry.
Oh, yes.
Heavenly Father, we just praise you and honor you and thank you for being our God, that we can come to your throne of grace with our petitions, our problems, our praises. Father, I thank you for Rex. I thank you for his ministry, but mostly I thank you for his love for you, because it's through that love that you have allowed him to reflect Christ in his life, that he's taken compassion on these people that many would think would be enemies, and he's accepted them. Also the people that he's dealing with, he has not been concerned about denomination or theology and all. I think he's just Christ focused, and we pray he stays that way. Mm-hmm. Father, I thank you for the hedge of protection that you put around him all these years. I pray that it would be there. I pray for continued wisdom and discernment for him as to when he is to go through doors and when he's to hold back. I thank you, Father, that he is the man and becoming even more the man that you want him to be. I just pray, Father, for financial assistance. I pray for travel mercies, but so much more than that. Just continue guiding him, Father, in all he does. Open the doors that need to be opened through politics, through different nations, through customs, through officials. Just continue doing things, Father, that we can't explain why they're done, but they're done for the right reason, is to share you. Soften hearts around them that may be hard, so that they, through his example, would see a genuine love and tenderness for others. And through that, Father, may you just always be at the honor and the glory and be praised. For it's in Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and I look forward to a follow-up report.